we're taking a look at the Stonehead SH-100-4R from AMT Electronics. So I was a bit skeptical when this one was on its way out to me. Having a 4-channel 100-watt amp inside of a single rack space seemed a little bit, let's just say, high in aspiration for me. I've heard, full-out amps that just didn't sound that good, so I wasn't sure how much they could cram into something and have it still be viable. I gotta say, this really exceeded my expectations. I don't gush about gear too heavily or too often, but I feel like this is pretty much in a class its own. So let's take a deeper look at it and find out how much they were able to pack into this. Now, first off, this is legitimately a 100-watt amp. It also has a step down. So you can go from 100 to 20 to 2 watts. So you can use it in almost any condition I can think of, whether it's practicing or a short rehearsal, a small gig, or full-blown stack big stage type of thing. It has a power amp and tube simulation in it that is just as good and probably even a little better than most of the units that I've worked with. AMT has its own proprietary technology on that, and it's doing a pretty massive job. Also on the back, which we'll cover in a minute, is you can select in between the emulation of 6L6 or EL34. So whatever type of amp that you prefer, kind of a bigger American style, Mesa style tone or something like that, you can get that out of the 6L6 and the EL34 for the more aggressive Marshall type of tones, that kind of thing. One switch on the back and you don't have to readjust anything. You just pop from one to the other. So there are, as I said, 4 legitimate channels. You have a clean, you have a crunch, lead 1, and lead 2. So let's take a quick look at each and look at the options that are available on them. All of them have the same fundamental controls. You've got your gain, bass, mid, treble, output. On the clean, the thing that sets it apart from some of the others is you have a shift button, which shifts kind of the overall balance of frequency to imitate different variations on some clean things. I was able to get things from Fender Bassman style things to almost a Roland JC120-esque type of sound out of it. And then you also have the voicing, which is on one other channel here as well. The voicing switch can move from a much darker, bassier type of sound, but it's not just kind of a treble switch or a darkening. It actually changes the character as you move it. So there's a lot of variations in it, and I was hard-pressed to find a pretty close approximation to a number of the clean amps and kind of classic tones that I like, as well as some of the modern. So next up on it is the crunch channel. This one is definitely set out to be kind of the JCM 800, I feel like, of the panel. A really good crunch, really good and solid. You have a low and high gain, so you can do it, kind of OG, less over the top, kind of regular Marshall head thing. And then you have a higher gain, which to me stepped it into either a slightly boosted or maybe even a modified Marshall type of thing. Not over the top, massive modern gain and things, but definitely great crunch, a lot of power to it and a lot of richness. And that switch kind of gets you in between those two. Now, next up is lead 1 being channel 3. That one also has a high and low gain switch, but it's definitely more high gain. It's the one I use for the majority of the rhythm tracks in the demo. And it's got the same basic functions, the gain, bass, mid, treble, but this one also has a voicing. And I found this one incredibly useful. Less so for even kind of modeling different amps, like going darker to Mesa or, much brighter to a much more aggressive, British Marshall type of tone, but also in being able to shape against different speaker cabinets. That's where I felt like this is kind of a thing you might not guess right up front. Put up against, some really dark, maybe like EV12Ls or something like that, where you've got a way more thud, voicing it and being able to contrast to your cabinet, I think is a big advantage, especially if you travel or you're on the road or something. You can't always pick your back line. So being able to tailor and get a bit more of what you need out of it going into a cabinet you're not familiar with, or maybe you change up your speaker set and it just needs some more brightness, or you've got some really bright, clear speakers with a great top end to them. Rolling that voicing back, you can change the character going in. Now, last up is lead 2, channel 4. That's definitely the big, massive, modern kind of high gain thing. You can use it as the lead channel, or again, as one of the really over-the-top, hyper-aggressive kind of modern amps that you would get much more gain out of. This one doesn't have the voicing channels like the other one, but it has something really interesting here at the end that does have an effect. And it has right here a little dip switch, and that's dry and fat. This changes the saturation character of that channel. Again, an option that just blew me away, in that someone would think to put that one in there. You can change the overall character. You can lean it dry, maybe into like VHT Pitbull type of territory, get it really sharp, hyper clear, no sponginess about it. You know, really kind of, if you're doing those tight palm muted chugs or something, that may be the option for you. Or you can go into the fat where it's richer, a bit more in the overtone, kind of a, you know, the looser, more saturated feeling with a bit more thump on the bottom. If you like that maybe Bogner-esque type of feel, something like that, that's the switch that's going to do it. Having that versatility in that channel, that opens up a ton of options. And again, depending on if you have maybe a Mesa oversized cabinet, something like that, where it's really big and deep and can be a little loose at times, being able to pop that in and be a little bit more dry and tighten that up. Or if you've got maybe a standard, you know, Marshall 1960 where it can be a little sharp and a little focused at times, being able to put the fat switch in and you know, add some richness to it and some openness. That was really impressive. This actually does have an effect, and it's not a gimmick where I feel like on a lot of units you have that kind of super awesome switch, and it just really is kind of over the top, or again, just kind of a gimmick. This one definitely has an effect, and you can dial the tone in against it, and it will change the overall feel of the gain structure and everything. So very cool on that one. Now, last up, the power section does have presence and resonance, and they sound great. I thought that those might be kind of limited because you're dealing with a virtual power section, but I felt that the response really did act like on one of my tube heads, how that kind of reshapes things and focuses them at the end of the tone chain. The other interesting thing here is you have two masters, and you can A/B them and have them switch, so you can have different master outputs. So in addition to the volumes of the different channels, you can have a master for the unit, different volume out, and switch in between those. That's another interesting piece that I wasn't sure would have that much functionality, but it definitely does. I can see a number of situations where I might want to change the entire unit over, or have it, if I'm going into maybe slaving it out to another unit, or going into some other heads using the preamp separately, which you can via the back unit. We'll get into that in a minute. But being able to set two different master volumes and have them switchable, that's really cool. So this thing has a crazy amount of options as far as being able to run the preamp out, run things into the power amp, use separate preamps, use the bricks from AMT, things like that. You've got cab sim outs, you've got line outs, you've got MIDI switching, you've got FX sends with a blend, so you can go 100% wet or mix. They really left no stone unturned with this one, and I'm really kind of shocked. But the amount of tones and high gain amps I could emulate was amazing, but I also really like the fact that it kind of sounds like itself. It definitely has its own character, and really getting deep into it is going to be interesting. Now, as far as the cab, I was going through the Pangea Ultima, also from AMT, which I loaded one of my own impulses into, and I also used the noise gate. I'll be reviewing that one here too, so check for that one. But if you want a much more extensive look into the routing and the switching and everything on the back, check out my further review at Guitar Interactive Magazine. Links down below. So what did you think of this? And does it kind of surprise you that all this can fit into a single rack space? I got to admit, I was, like I said, I was skeptical, but I'm a believer on this one. I really enjoy it, and it's definitely going to be kind of the staple of the studio. Are you surprised by it? Did you think you could be convinced? Are you going to look into it? Interested in your thoughts? Hit me up in the comments below. As always, I'll look forward to seeing you down there, and that's going to wrap it for this one. I will see you next time.